Welcome back to Mean Streets, the podcast where we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir and more. I am Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And we are your cinematic sleuths. Now it's time to crack another case. Hello, Matt. Welcome back.
Hello, Luke. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for this week's episode. How about you?
Yeah, very much so. This is one that I go back to for various reasons. For various reasons.
There's many. There's one particular person that is worth going back to for this.
We'll get into that.
We will. Well, let's not keep the people in suspense any longer. What are we doing today?
Well, today we're looking at 1987's No Way Out, starring Kevin Costner, Gene Hackman, and Sean Young. Written by Robert Garland, adapted from the novel The Big Clock by Kenneth Fearing, and directed by Roger Donaldson. And the IMDb logline is: the Secretary of Defense forces a Pentagon naval aide to lead a spy manhunt.
That is No Way Out. But we are not doing this investigation alone. We have brought on another cinematic sleuth who has a lot of things to say, some insights. Bring some valuable bit of knowledge to this movie. But we have Martin Edwards joining us. He is the editor of the British Library. He is the editor of the British Library Crime Classics series, author of the Rachel Sevenake series, and his latest novel is Miss Winter in the Library with a Knife. Martin, welcome to Mean Streets.
Welcome to Mean Streets, Martin.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure. So, Martin, what we like to do when we sort of kick these off is discuss initial impressions first before we dive into nitty gritty. Just kind of the vague, non-spoilery impressions of the film. We'll start with you as the guest. Think back to way back when you first saw No Way Out.
Yeah.
What's your impression?
Yeah, I really liked it. I came to it because I loved the book, The Big Clock, as you've mentioned, and the film that was made of The Big Clock. And I loved the concept, which we'll talk about more later, I'm sure. I love the concept of the manhunt in it. And so I didn't really know. My feeling about remakes usually is why? And this was billed as a remake when I first saw it. But I think that if you remake a film, you've got to have a good justification, and there's a major justification in this case because there's a dramatic change in the plot, which we'll talk about later in a plenty of spoilery way. But it really took my breath away to see how they'd taken a very, very good story and made something fresh with it. And at the time, it was very much in the zeitgeist. Kevin Costner was nothing like as well known as he became a few years later. And I absolutely love the idea of this guy who is basically, and we'll say more about this shortly, a guy who's given the task of hunting an alleged killer. The twist being that he is the person he is supposed to be hunting. He is the alleged killer, although he isn't really the killer. That's part of the concept of the story. So it's a clever idea, and it's executed, I think, in a very clever way, and in a way that I thought at the time justified remaking it. And having watched it twice since then, in the intervening years, I still think it was a good way to reinvent the story. And I think, again, it does really work on its own terms very, very well.
I fully agree with that. I agree. I was also impressed with its with how it approaches the concept of a remake. I think back to Body Heat and Double Indemnity. Again, a remake, but is so wildly different but similar and feels justified. Where it's more like it's almost like, is it a remake or is it just taking the concept and doing its own thing with the concept more than being a thought. I want to say thoughtful remake, and by that I mean a true remake of the original. But no, this was No Way Out is a thrill ride to me. It's this interesting blend of 80s erotic thriller, then it becomes a political thriller, then it becomes a spy movie, and you're sort of rushed along with it. And on paper, you're like, is this gonna work? Is this too much? But it is. I want to say perfect. This is to me a pitch perfect film. I think from casting through visuals through everything, this film can grip you in a way that I think a lot of films today maybe don't do so well. I would I don't know, this thing was working like clockwork to me. I was hooked on it the whole time. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with either of you, but I come to this from the opposite direction to Martin, in the sense that I saw this before I knew the big clock existed. So I'll have been about 13 when this came out, and I don't remember going to the pictures to see it, so I probably didn't. But I do remember it being on TV and watching it, only with the read up from the Radio Times or whatever it would have been in those days, and thinking it just sounded really good, and so I watched it. And so the twist ending came as an absolute surprise to me. I didn't know anything about the big clock, as I say, so it really was a bolt upright in your seat twist. Are you kidding me? What? And then as I got older, I did learn about the big clock, and I watched that, and I thought, well. And then very much like Martin says, and like you said, Luke, I think this is what a remake should be. It should be faithful to the original enough that it's recognizable, but it should do something of its own. And I think that's what this does. So we were saying just before we started recording, Luke and I said this is a faithful remake, and Luke added, that's not faithful. And I think that's a fair summary. That's a fair summary of this film, because this film, it stands on its own. It stands on its own 2 feet, just as the big clock does. Which is why it's difficult, I think, to say that one is better than the other. Other than to say one was the original concept. So, yeah, I'm a fan of this film. Spoiler alert to the rating at the end, but I'm a fan of this film to the extent that anyone that caught Luke and I on Tipping My Fedora podcast, another film noir podcast, with our friend Sergio, he did an episode about remakes, top 5 remakes, and this was my number 1 of my choices for those very reasons. It does everything I think a remake should do, and does it very well.
Yeah,
I agree. It's almost like it's one of those things where, like, in today, if you think about like the cinematic landscape today, would they even call this a remake, or would they just, all of these scenes that are replicated, would it just be, this is an homage?
Yeah.
I sort of wonder how this would be handled today, because I wonder if they would even give it the credit of being labeled a remake, or even include written by or adapted by Fearing's work. I don't know, maybe they would. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is almost beat for beat exactly the same between the two, which is maybe the justification for that. But I could see it maybe today being more of an homage than necessarily a labeled this is a remake of this.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I don't think, I'm not sure they would, I think they'd say it was enough differences between the two. But you're right. I mean, the bare bones of this story, I don't know what you think, Martin, about this, but the bare bones, although the settings changed and professions have changed and all the rest of it, the fundamental beats of this story are the same. Until No Way Out's double twist.
Yes.
Right at the very end, which we'll come on to.
Yes.
But the actual mechanics of this plot are the same. And in terms of a remake, this is a remake for that reason. Would you agree with that?
I do agree, and I guess in terms of whether credit will be given today, probably depend on the quality of the lawyers for the estate of Kenneth Fearing, the deceased. But who knows? But yes, it is to me a remake in a sense where I feel that although Body Heat is definitely a homage to Double Indemnity, it is different, and so I would draw a distinction between Body Heat and No Way Out, in that for me, No Way Out is definitely a remake. Body Heat is definitely a standalone piece which pays lavish tribute to another great film.
Yes. So we might as well go behind the scenes and talk about how this film got made. So it was released in the U.S. on August 14th, 1987. A few months before I was born. The budget was 15.
How old do you make me feel?
I know. I do it just to poke.
Imagine how I feel.
We're all young at heart. The budget was $15 million. The box office return was $35.5 million. So hey, not bad. Not bad. As we mentioned, adapted from The Big Clock by Kenneth Fearing. We can talk a little bit about the book. I think now might be a good time to do that because, as you've already said, Matt, this is a faithful adaptation that I say is not faithful at all. But I mean that in a endearing way. It's the original book and the film have a lot more similarities between the two of them in terms of character names and locations and settings, and then this is very different. But Martin, I think you have a lot to say about the book and the crime fiction element of this, so I'll let you take the reins.
Yeah, thanks. I first became aware of The Big Clock when I read Julian Simmons' Bloody Murder, and he mentions the book and the film, and in his characteristically acerbic way, he says, "For once, the film wasn't a travesty of the book." That's true. And so I hunted down the book and found it a few years after that, so a long time ago. I read it, a library edition, and it's been reprinted occasionally ever since. And The Big Clock was one of a number of novels written by Kenneth Fearing, who was better known as a poet, and quite an interesting character in his life as a poet. But he wrote occasional novels. This was the most crimey of them, although there were two or three others that had strong crime elements. One of them, I think it's called Clark Gifford's Body, has about 38 viewpoints, which is at least 30 too many. So he wasn't always successful, but The Big Clock was his most successful published novel, I think by a distance. But there's something interesting about The Big Clock that I want to mention before we delve into the storyline of it. Because around the same time, or maybe a little earlier, a book was published called The Dark Page. And that's a book that not many people have come across, but it was written by somebody who I think you two guys will have come across, by the name of Samuel Fuller, who was an actor and a film director and an occasional novelist, and pretty good at all three. And the plot, we talked about giving credit, a few minutes ago. Well, the plot of The Dark Page, the basic concept, is eerily similar to that of The Big Clock. But when you actually look into this this kind of subgenre of crime fiction, this idea of someone who is given the task of hunting someone who's believed to be a killer, but actually the person he's hunting is himself, you find that there are examples of that essential storyline both before and after Samuel Fuller and Kenneth Fearing. The British writer Bruce Graham wrote a detective novel where a policeman basically hunts himself, and he's the killer. It's not a particularly well-known story, but he was writing in the 30s. He had a long career, but this book was in the 30s. So that predates both Fuller and Fearing, and it's probably most unlikely that either of them would have read that book. And I think that this illustrates the fact that it's pretty common for writers to come up with ideas that you think it's a wonderfully original concept. You know, at last I've thought of something that's truly original, it's mine. And then, sometime later, you find out it's not as original as you believe. My very first novel, All Lonely People, had an idea that I was convinced was a brilliant comment on Thatcher's Britain, the discovery of a corpse in a waste heap. And about 20 years later, I read a book from the 1930s by Douglas Cole with exactly that same situation. So it's very hard to be truly original. And so even Samuel Fuller didn't have this idea first, but I think he came up with it independently. I'm pretty sure about that. Kenneth Fearing may or may not have come up with the idea independently, but he made a good job of it, and The Big Clock was a more successful book than The Dark Page. I think assisted by the fact that Fuller was, I think he was fighting in the war by this point. I think he's in the army, so he wasn't around to promote his book at the time. Kenneth Fearing didn't have that complication. No. But then again, this idea of the investigator hunting someone who actually is himself has been used time and again since then. There's a film which I'm strongly suspect both of you will know, a film with Lawrence Harvey called A Dandy in Aspic from I think the late 60s, spy movie, Cold War spy movie, but long before No Way Out. But again, it's got this same idea, based on a book by Derek Marlowe, very good book and a fairly good film. Julian Simmons in the 50s, he was a great admirer of The Big Clock, as I've mentioned, and he wrote a book, The Killing of Francie Lake, which has, again, this idea of the hunter and the hunted being the same person. And indeed, so fascinated am I by this whole concept, I've used it myself in a book of mine as a subplot rather than the main plot. But I wanted to try to do something different with it. And that's a book called Sepulchre Street. So this idea has been around for quite a long time, and it's come up in different guises. Noirish stories, police stories, spy stories, and it's capable, if it's well executed, of being incredibly tense and gripping. And The Big Clock is a book that is really gripping. It's told from multiple viewpoints. The main viewpoint is George Stroud, who is the equivalent in the book of Kevin Costner's character in the film. And this is a novel that's partly a satire on the newspaper business, the newspaper barons, Randolph Hearst and people like that. And the newspaper baron in the book is a guy called Earl Yanoff. And he's got a mistress that is a secret. People don't know about it. And the mistress is murdered. Judge Stroud is a witness. He knows that Yanoff is the killer. He's one of Yanoff's top journalists, if not the number one investigative reporters. And Yanoff basically tasks him with finding out who the mistress's lover was. And so he's in this situation of having to hunt himself. And because the book's written from multiple viewpoints, I think there are 5 or 6 different viewpoints, not 38. Thank God.
Thankfully.
That is definitely too many. Definitely. What was he thinking? But there are 5 or 6 viewpoints. It's mainly Stroud and Yanoff. There are a few others who pop in and out. And that shifting of viewpoint ratchets up the tension in the way that you get it in the film, with the different scenes from different perspectives in the film, both The Big Clock and No Way Out. And it's a good way, if it's done well, of injecting pace into a hunt story. And it works also particularly well if there's a very tight timeline. And the idea of the big clock in the book gives you this element of the clock race that lends pace and suspense and tension to the storyline. It's not a long book. Books in the 40s tended to be a bit shorter than they are today, by and large. And it's written very economically. As I say, Kenneth Fearing was a poet, and you can see that. Even if you didn't know, you would deduce it from reading the way that he writes and the economy with which he writes. It is a well-written book in the sort of what you might call a hard-boiled style, for sure. But he does it pretty elegantly, because he's not really an experienced crime writer. The climax is slightly thrown away. It's not quite as strong as it might be, given that the story is so brilliant. But and indeed, I think you could say that No Way Out is much stronger in terms of the climax than Big Clock. But because that really is great, as I'm sure you agree. But the book has a lot going for it, and Kenneth Fearing, as I say, in many ways it's a pity that he didn't write more crime fiction, because he certainly had quite a talent, even if he did arguably borrow the idea from Samuel Fuller.
Yeah, I think picking up on that, what it sort of makes me think of it when you talk about, who came up with it first, who did it first, and then the replications that you see. It's really no different to just your the hard boiled genre generally. Was it Dashiell Hammett who came up with it first? Is it someone else who came up with it first? For me, it always boils down to that line from Chandler where it's like, look, it's all about style. That's how you bring the originality to this stuff. So whether, you can have these two different people who are doing the same thing, and the thing that makes them both similar but unique, in my opinion, I think, from, taking from Chandler, is it's the style. It's what you bring to it. That I think
the voice.
That's
what is different between the two books that are the same basic idea is, of course, the personality of the people that write them. Because they bring their own stuff to it. So Chandler brings that voice, that style. Hammett brings the toughness that he himself had experienced and witnessed and all the rest of it when he was a PI himself. It's what you bring to it that makes it, because otherwise things would all be the same and we'd only read about 10 crime novels and then be done with the genre. So I think that's right. I think it's what you are yourself. We're all different. So you can give someone a basic idea. When I did my TV and radio script writing masters, we were given, I might mention this before on this podcast, we were given a setup which was a man is released from prison and goes out after the revenge on the man who he blames for being put in prison in the first place. There were 20 of us in the class, 20 different stories. Lecturer says, well, really what it is Cape Fear.
Right, yes.
21st way of telling that premise, Yeah,
that's very true. And anyone who's interviewed witnesses in a court case, as I've done many times, will know that each witness tells their story in their own way. You sometimes wonder if they were in the same country at the time of the anything else. So I absolutely agree with what you say. And it's I would add that I mentioned Julian Simmons' book, The Killing of Francie Lake, which is actually not one of his best books, but he's a very good writer, but variable. But first time I read that, I didn't pick up that it was a riff on The Big Clock. It was only when I read it again, sometime later, it suddenly dawned on me that, of course, this is what he's done. He's taken this idea and he's done something different with
it. Which I think is what No Way Out does. It takes The Big Clock and does its own thing with the basic tools. Yeah. But it builds its own fence, as it were. Yeah. So and that's why I think it deserves credit for, and why I say it stands on its own principles and its own 2 feet as a film in its own right. Whereas you can name a dozen remakes in inverted commas where the general consensus is, well, it's nowhere near as good as the original. Things like Sleuth and Alfie and The Italian Job.
I thought you were going to go for the low-hanging fruit of Psycho.
Oh, well, God. I'd erase that from my memory. None of those remakes can stand on their own 2 feet, whereas No Way Out can, most definitely.
Yeah. So it's directed by Roger Donaldson, known for all sorts of films. Known for The Bounty from 1984, Cocktail starring Tom Cruise in 88, Dante's Peak in 97.
I forgot about Dante's Peak.
He's not a director that I think of when I think of, it's gonna be mean, when I think of quality. Like Dante's Peak is just goofball goofiness.
Yeah.
Cocktail does not hold together to save its life. I've not seen The Bounty, so I can't.
The Bounty is excellent. The Bounty is excellent. It's it's essentially told from Bligh's point of view as opposed to Fletcher Christian's. And I watched it recently after many years, and it's a really good character study of a man in impossible situations, doing the best he can to keep his naval credentials and his naval duties afloat, pardon the pun. And it's a really good take on it for people who think, if you think Charles Laughton as Captain Bligh, who of course is in The Big Clock, if you take Charles Laughton as Captain Bligh, he's a sadist. Anthony Hopkins' Bligh isn't. And it's a really good sort of reversal, or like you said, looking at it from a different point of view, perhaps is a better way of putting it. So I highly recommend The Bounty, more so than Dante's Peak.
Well, I don't recommend it. I recommend Dante's Peak if you are drunk. That's about the only way. But speaking of The Bounty, then, I mean, that shades of that sound like No Way Out. And obviously going with this, Costner's character has a naval background. Was this his influence, do we think? I couldn't find out, but I'm just wondering, because he went from The Bounty to to go and do this, not necessarily directly, but is there influence from his work on The Bounty that's bleeding over into No Way Out with that sort of making it military versus publishing, going with naval stuff. Do we think there's a connection there?
Possibly, but I think a closer connection is that it's a man for whom time is running out.
Yeah, same as that. Yeah,
and he's got to resolve this situation as best he can, but everything is against him, And there's I'm not saying that The Bounty is as exciting as No Way Out by any means, but there is a similar thematic sort of progress there, because Bly knows he's losing control, just as Kevin Costner knows he's losing control, of the situation that he's in, and so there's certainly a sort of synergy there. I think the naval thing might be a coincidence. I don't know, but there's to me there's definitely a thematic, purely from the way he presents Bly. There's no correlation in story or anything like that, but in the way that Donaldson presents Captain Bly, I think there is a suggestion or a relationship between the two main characters of these two films.
Yeah. I see that. Martin, are we onto something, or are we not? Are we talking shit?
I think so. I think the other thing that occurs to me is that if I were to guess what the scriptwriter, it's Roger Garland, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was in his mind? It might be this: the big clock. It, as I say, it's set in the world of this massive publishing empire, and Janoth is a very, very powerful man. In No Way Out, again, we've got a power situation, but here it's the power of the defense establishment, if you like. And so it's transformed from a kind of private enterprise mega corporation to a massive public body, and the power is even greater than it is in the big clock, and also you've got this international dimension, because there's a spy, Yuri, and there's suspicion about who might the spy be. Is Yuri the killer? That kind of thing. So I think it's a film to some extent about the abuse of power, and there's a little bit of that in the big clock. There is kind of political subtext to the big clock, certainly in the book, maybe more so than the film, and that reflects Fearing, I think. And in No Way Out, you've got this enormously powerful man, Bryce, played by Gene Hackman, but representing a very powerful organisation with many, many tools and resources at his disposal. And of course, Costner is feeling very isolated and vulnerable, as Judge Stroud does in the original book.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to that. There's that scene where Costner's character Farrell goes into an office, and the woman is making her tea, and she tells her to leave, and he makes a phone call. But she makes the comment, Big Brother is always listening. And the way in which he is gathering information from, using the computers to gather information to get his friend to get information when they should be waiting until they open the next day. Like, there's a lot of, as a swapping out the publishing world for this kind of apparatus, I think it's like I said, it's similar but different. It's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. And handled so well. Garland is an interesting, in terms of his credits. I just want to briefly mention some of his credits, because when I was looking these up, they really weren't what I was expecting. He did a lot of comedy. He wrote for That Girl, the Bob Newhart Show, Sanford and Son, The Cosby Show, had uncredited work on The Twilight Zone, the movie, and Tootsie. A bizarre list of credits that how you get from this to No Way Out is really quite interesting. But clearly it's a to me it's a very accomplished script. This is just cracking from start to finish, and I'm kind of, there's a part of it's a bit sort of, I don't know, disappointed that we don't have other Garland scripts that are as powerful as this, but also No Way Out doesn't have, is also sort of lesser known. I don't want to necessarily go as far as to call it underrated. I feel like the term underrated is being used all the time now for like people who just don't remember life beyond a certain decade.
I agree.
And it's very frustrating. But when I think about Kevin Costner, like, this is not a film that ever comes to mind. Now, is that me and, you know, the way I view the world, or is it that in general No Way Out is possibly a lesser known, possibly underrated in his sort of filmography? You know, I'm not sure, but it does feel like it's one that isn't talked about enough, but possibly should be up there with, it should be listed as one of his greats. And is this because this came out before he really became Kevin Costner?
Yeah, I think it is. I agree entirely. Well, first of all, I agree that underrated is now misused, because I think people who know this film don't consider it underrated. That's so, you know, by definition, it isn't. That sort of thing.
Yes.
There's a difference between underrated and not known about. There's a difference.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, this is quite early on in Costner's career, for certainly, and it's before things like Robin Hood and JFK, where he
Field of Dreams,
you know, The Bodyguard. Whatever you think about these films, The Bodyguard, he went through, not long after this, he went through a flurry of activity.
Yeah.
And became massive box office draw, and made a ton of cash for studios and himself, I'd no doubt. And I think under the weight of all those blockbusters, this $15 million thriller gets lost. I think that's the truth of it. I think, you know, if he'd not gone on so quickly to do so many blockbusters, I think things might have been differently. Things might have turned out differently.
Yeah.
In all honesty.
Also, it is a Cold War thriller, and the Cold War ended, at least for the time, not long after this film was released. Yeah, in many ways, you might say it's this is a film that acquires a new relevance as a reference point nowadays. But back then, it was at the tail end of the period, wasn't it? And that may influence why it's not as discussed as I think we would all agree it should be. It deserves to.
Oh, definitely. It's interesting you say that, Matt, as well, because in preparation for this, I read a couple of reviews, and one of them, I can't now remember which one it was, but one of them said the reviewer said he'd watched it again recently as a sort of you know, trip down memory lane sort of thing, and he said, I was expecting it to be a dated, cheesy, late 80s flick. And what I got was not only a thrilling, nail-biting ride, but one that seems more relevant than anything released in the last 5 years in terms of its politics and the corruption of the government and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And you know, he said it's dangerously relevant almost. And you know, I think it's this film is due a second wave. I really believe that.
Yeah, well, maybe we've hit on something ultra topical.
Maybe.
I hope so.
Because you know that is the way I see it. It's a Cold War thriller that seemed of its time, although very, very good. But now it's got an extra dimension, a bit like all those golden age detective stories I love from the 30s. They're written in the era of international tension and economic depression. That all of a sudden, you know, why are they so very popular now, all over again?
Yes.
Well, it's because there are certain parallels. Things are different now from then, but there are some similarities.
Definitely. Before we dive into the story, let's talk the cast a little bit. So Kevin, Sean, and Gene. Kevin Costner plays Tom Farrell. I'm always fascinated when I can find alternative castings.
Yeah.
For these roles. So I just want to get your opinion on a couple of these. So apparently both Mel Gibson and Patrick Swayze turned down the role of Tom Farrell. And I'm wondering, what do we think? How would this film have turned out with Mel Gibson or Patrick Swayze in this role?
Not as well, I don't think. There's something about Costner's able to do the tough when he needs to be tough. He's able to be the lover when he needs to be the lover, and he's able to convey total panic when he is genuinely panicking. And I wonder sometimes whether Swayze would in quite the same way.
Swayze is a big no for me. Big no for me, Swayze.
I can sort of see Mel Gibson doing it, sort of.
I can definitely see Gibson in this. I can see it.
But I don't think he would have been as good.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely not Patrick Swayze. Mel Gibson possibly, but I agree with what you said about Costner. And also, there's an element of earnestness, isn't there? In character that he had at that stage of his life, his career, that he conveys very credibly. I think that's quite distinctive.
It gave me shades of, and I mean this in an actual complimentary way, but it gave me shades of kind of Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men, where he is really giving a damn good performance.
Yeah.
Almost like it's like not say the performance of his life, but there is as you said, an earnestness to his performance that is, he is pushing himself, and you can see it, but. And what I mean by that is not that you can see that he's acting, but you can see that he is pouring everything into this role to get this sweetness that he's having with his romance with Susan Atwell, the fury he's getting when he's finding out that that she hasn't ended it with David Bryce, and the shock and horror when he's collapsing in the bathroom after he's read that the woman that he loves and just spent the night with is now dead, and he has to investigate. I mean, that scene, my God, that scene was terrific.
Terrific, yeah. When he realizes it's him,
yeah,
that is it. The look on his face is absolutely brilliant, because he conveys that he's learning it for the first time. He's very, very good at letting you know that he's learning this for the first, as we are, sort of thing. And that would be that's a perfectly natural reaction to go and want to throw your guts up in the nearest toilet. I think it's a really good scene. But I also like the scene where he's angry with Sean Young's character when he says, "Why don't you tell Gene Hackman not to come in?"
Yes.
The sort of what he sees as the slight of it all. That he's got to scurry out of the back door or the window or whatever it is, and. After the time they've been having, sort of thing, and again, I think that's a very natural reaction. It makes this character very realistic to me and very rounded and believable and human, so that I am totally invested. When he realizes he's got to look for himself, I am totally invested in how he's going to get out of it.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of Sean Young, my God, she is fantastic in this, and my God, she is painfully beautiful in this.
Is she better in this than in Blade Runner?
Oh yes. This is an interesting question. I think it's hard to say, because I think with Blade Runner, which we covered a few weeks ago or something like that, she was very young, young and new to this sort of level of production, of acting, and there's lots of there's her on camera talking about how Ford really helped focus her and get her into the space. And I think there's some of that nervousness and uncertainty that I think is there in Blade Runner, but I think helps influence the character of Rachel really well. But when you compare these two, I think you definitely see a way more bold and confident actor here, who understands this character and feels wholly alive, and three-dimensional in a role that really could be quite thin and almost just there for, I don't know, leery purposes. She makes it, she elevates it, I think, in a way that, you know, is it a better version of the role than what we get in the Big Clock?
Oh, it's very different, isn't it? Very different, and the book is different again. So it's hard to compare, I think. But I agree with what you say about Sean Young's performance. I think it is very strong. You were talking a few weeks ago about Long Good Friday, and it's in a very different way. Helen Mirren brings something out of a character that may not have been in the script, probably wasn't in the script, and again, that's what a good actor will do.
Yeah, the character of Sean Young's character, I can't remember what she's called now.
Susan Atwell.
That's the one. In lesser hands, she would be she'd almost be a MacGuffin. She'd almost exist so that she can die.
Yeah, exactly. And
Sean Young does a superb job of avoiding that, stopping that from happening.
Yeah.
And I think she deserves every credit. I agree. It's an almost impossible question to answer. Compare the two between Blade Runner and this, and also between this and the Big Clock in terms of the character. But there's no doubt that Sean Young's much more in control of her performance in this. I mean, she's leaps and bounds from that uncertainty and that nervousness that you mentioned in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I mean, the scene in the party when doesn't she say to the party at the beginning? Doesn't she say to one of the blokes, "If you want to look down my dress, you need to grow a few inches," or something like that? I mean, she's a powerful woman.
Yes.
She's a gutsy, powerful woman who sees what she wants and goes out and gets it. And what she wants is Kevin Costner's character, and she goes and gets it. And she's a very believable and ultimately tragic character because she essentially stands up for herself.
Yeah. Well, even her first line, I love her first line where she's being, the little scanner thing is being, what do you call that thing? What's the thing we use these scan
metal
people?
Detector.
Metal detector. Goddamn. There's that bit at the beginning of the movie with the metal detector where she's being scanned and she's like, it's not a bullshit detector because if it was, none of us would get in.
Yeah.
And that just sums up her whole personality. And then when she meets Kevin Costner's Tom Farrell, he's like, "Hey, why don't we get out of here?" And she's like, "Oh, well, the guy I'm with is going to get going to be pretty angry." And then, you just get this sense of she doesn't like to be there. She's got this sort of big personality, but she clearly feels oppressed, and you're getting all of this from her delivery, and not necessarily, And I think, so her performance in this is just fantastic. I could praise every scene she's in. I was almost gutted when she died, and I knew she was going to die, but I was just like, oh. But they do she gets half the film. It's about an hour. It's an hour in, where it's interesting because this film, like the first hour, really feels like an erotic thriller rather than anything else. It's sneaking around behind Bryce's back. These hot for each other, doing it in the limo, all this kind of stuff. And going on little trips. It's the way that this thing balances the different types of thrillers, but feels cohesive, I think is really impressive to me. Really impressive. Two others were that I found potentials to play Susan Atwell. Let's get your opinion on this. Michelle Pfeiffer and Priscilla Presley. Well, I will say I would be fine with Michelle Pfeiffer. I think she could do it.
Well, I was going to say there's a yes and a no.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
I mean, I can understand Priscilla Presley because she was on Dallas at this time, I think, or could just come off it, and I can see her thinking this would be a way to get a serious acting career, but no, no. Yeah, I can understand why she wanted it. I'm glad she didn't want
it. It's a role that I think what Sean Young has, as you've indicated, it's an assurance. That's what the character has, and that's it's very well done. Will Priscilla Presley have done that? Well, we'll never know.
Well, no,
God.
I think there's an element of toughness about Sean Young, almost sort of tomboyish, and I think Priscilla Pfeiffer would have played on the sort of sexiness, I think, and got away with it. But I think Priscilla Presley, she'd have been one of those breathless, sort of beautiful damsels, and there'd have been no agency whatsoever. She wouldn't have done anything with the role. Yeah. Of the three, I mean, it goes in that order for me. It goes, we got what we deserved in Sean Young. She was absolutely right. I'd have taken Michelle Pfeiffer, but Priscilla's a no-go, I'm afraid, for me. Yeah. Stick to the Naked Gun.
Yes. Now, Gene Hackman as David Bryce, I think, is fantastic in this role. I off camera or mic, I said to you, Matt, before you turned up, Martin, I said that what Gene Hackman is doing here is what I wish he was doing as Lex Luthor in Superman, because but I just do not like his Lex Luthor. I hate the goofy cornball comedy aspect of what they do with Lex Luthor in that movie. I think it just it irritates me. If he had this level of menace and, grit, that's borderline perfect Lex Luthor. But I love this performance of Hackman's in this film for those reasons I've just said. I think he is when he actually does the deed or the build up to the deed of killing Sean Young, and he is losing it and he's going back and forth. That really terrifying bit when he hits her and she runs upstairs, gonna call the police, and he comes up after her, and then he's like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have hit you. And you think he's gonna calm down, and then he lunges at her again. You're like, God, this guy's effing insane. Like he is. Yeah. What a goddamn scene. And then when he pushes her over the side and he realizes what he's done, I mean, I legitimately feel that he has legit remorse for it. I don't think he intended to do it in the way that it wasn't maybe an intended thing in the big clock either. But just the way both of these films, the way they depict the rage and the seeing of red, and then the revelation of what they've done is just it's sublime. I think it's wonderfully done.
Yeah, you've got three central performances here that are in their own way. Well, they're true to their own characters, but they are all fully rounded, believable, three-dimensional human beings. Because I agree, he is terrifying. Hackman is terrifying in those moments leading up to the death. But straight after, instantly, shock and then panic. Yeah. And he runs to Pritchard and says, I don't know what to do. I'm sort of really scared. Yeah. And what am I going to do about this? How are we going to get out of it? And then kicks in the self-preservation, the selfish self-preservation, and what are we going to do about it? How are we going to cover it up? And all that is perfectly believable for a man of that type, and I agree, Hackman sells every second of it. Just in the same way that I said about Kevin Costner selling, the panic, the toughness, the seduction technique, all that business. Hackman does the same for the emotions that he's got to go through as well. I think it's a stunning performance. And I think if you look at the alternative casting for Bryce, I think again we got the right choice.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, yeah. So I'll rattle off some of those names. We have Robert Mitchum, Paul Newman, James Coburn, Gregory Peck. They all turned down the role apparently.
Now I'm a big fan of Robert Mitchum, but I don't think I think he just wouldn't care enough. His Bryce wouldn't be wound up enough. I think he'd be so laid back about it all, and yet when he wants to be, he's very menacing. But I just think his delivery of the lines would be a bit too laconic.
I think Newman would have been interesting. I would have liked Newman. Look, there's a version of this film where it's Mel Gibson, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Paul Newman, and that is still an excellent film. Yeah,
I would also say James Coburn. I think he'd be good.
Yeah, but Martin, what's your take on David Bryce and Gene Hackman?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of Gene Hackman. I've not seen that many of his films. I'm not steeped in movies as you two guys, but two of my favourite crime films feature Gene Hackman. One of them is this one, and the other one is The Conversation, where I think he's just fantastic. And when you think of the difference between Harry in The Conversation, the detective, and this role, you see what fantastic range he's got. And the French Connection is a great film, but it never made as big an impression on me as either this film or The Conversation, because there's a subtlety to the performance in both cases, I think. And for me also, I think that Robert Mitchum, I think, just isn't quite right, because Robert Mitchum is many things, but there isn't a brittleness to him by and large that there is in Gene Hackman. Paul Newman, Butch Cassidy is one of my favourite films of all time, but I don't quite see him having the sheer ruthless cruelty that Bryce has when push comes to shove. James Coburn, a good actor, but for me not really anything like in the Gene Hackman league. So for me, Gene Hackman is an ideal choice. I agree that alternative universe film would be a good one, but I don't think it would have the resonance that this particular version, the actual version, luckily has and still has, as we've been saying.
No, definitely. This was a lightning in the bottle situation where just everyone was perfectly cast. I think this is, every aspect of this film was everyone is the right person for the job to get this film to the level that it is, the quality that it is. This, like I was saying, I've said this a few times now. I mean, like that first hour, I said, is this erotic thriller, and then the second hour becomes a political thriller, and I would say that the next maybe 40 minutes becomes a political thriller, and then that last little bit is almost Agatha Christie locked room mystery.
Yeah,
and it's nuts. It is genuinely nuts how much stuff is being balanced in this, and it feels natural,
Yeah, and I would add to that it's all those things. And it's a brilliant example of all those things. When it's being the erotic thriller, it's a great example of one. When it's being the spy thriller, it's a great example of one. When it's being a whodunit, it's a great example of one. So whichever mask it's wearing, it's high caliber. And as you say, juggling that in an hour and 40 odd minutes is pretty impressive.
I agree. It doesn't feel like a long film at all. To me, it feels concise, but there is a huge amount in it, as you've just both been saying. I think that's absolutely true. and the way it shifts gear is done very, very smoothly. You're not even necessarily conscious that the nature of the story is changing, but you're right, it does change. And the manhunt, the central element of the big clock isn't quite as dominant in this version as it was in the original.
No. All right, let's like talk about maybe some of our favorite scenes before we get into the ending, the reveal, and whatnot. Are there scenes that really stand out to you guys? I definitely have a couple, but Martin, why don't you go first?
Well, as I said earlier, when I first watched this, I knew it was pitched as a remake of The Big Clock. So the opening scene baffled me completely. So what's going on here?
Yeah.
Yes. This wasn't in the book. What are they doing? So I came at it from that angle, and it troubled me to begin with, and then I got into the story, the seduction, the affair, and so on, and I put it to one side. But I think what is clever about it is that there are these little tiny reminders in the script every now and then, foreshadowing, so you never 100% lose that opening scene. And then, of course, things come round full circle at the end, and the interrogation at the beginning makes more sense than it did to me. And I think another thing that occurs to me is that shows the problem with coming to a film with preconceived ideas, as I did the first time I watched it, because I was expecting a certain type of story, a story I was very, very keen on, as I've mentioned, and very interested in the mechanics of. And I was puzzled by that opening scene. But I actually think it's really, really well done. And certainly by the end of the film, I was absolutely converted. I admired it enormously. And I mean, who knows, I may have watched it at the same time as you, Matthew, on television, because I did see it first on television. I can recall that. And I would think it would have been, as it was in those days, maybe a couple of years before the cinematic, a couple of years after the cinematic release, so maybe 89, 90, something like that, I would imagine.
I think it was 88-ish, 89.
Yeah, something like that, because there was always a sizable gap. So that opening scene, which seems weird when you come at it with preconceived ideas, is actually a very clever hook. I now think.
Yeah, and it's almost the same hook as Murder My Sweet has.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because guy being interrogated and you don't know who he is or why he's in there, and then he has to tells the story in flashback almost. But like you say, Matt, I came to this, as I said at the opening, with no preconceived ideas whatsoever. So I really was falling for all these twists and all the and I was almost a psycho moment when she went over the banister, because I thought, well, where are we going from here? Sort of thing, and it really packed a punch with me. I instantly wanted to watch it again, but of course we'd not recorded it on our VHS, or couldn't do. But yeah, I think that opening, I'd go along with you. That opening scene is a really good hook and a really good tease into what follows, that is then brilliantly paid off with the second twist of the film at the end.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I have a few scenes that I really love. I love the first scene where Susan takes Tom to her friend Nina's house.
Yes.
And makes her get out of her house and go to her house.
Yeah,
obviously, this is obviously to allow her freedom from Bryce, of course. But I do have to acknowledge the actress that we have, Iman, known for Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
David Bowie's wife.
David Bowie's wife. Just absolutely ridiculously beautiful. Holy goodness God. Jeez. But yeah, no, I really loved that particular scene there between and but then also her 2 follow-up scenes. Those scenes really stood out to me. The next one where Farrell and Scott Pritchard, played by Will Patton, go to Nina's house.
Yeah,
and
this is real suspense.
Yes, and she knows that Farrell has been there. She knows that Farrell has been with Atwell, and then you got Pritchard there who is interrogating her, and he's being brutal and sleazy, and he's digging through her passport and threatening to send her back to South Africa, whereas apartheid is going on and she's here illegally. That scene and just her loyalty and ability to sort of the character rather to understand that Farrell is the good person in the room and Pritchard here is the bad one, and to read that.
There's some great performances in there because Pritchard is a real sleaze.
God, he
and the silent dialogue, bear with me, the silent dialogue between Iman and Kevin Costner is absolutely superb.
Yes,
they convey a couple of exchanges of dialogue in just a few blinks of the eye, and you know exactly what is going through their minds, and that is just great. And then it's framed in that way that it's from Nina's point of view with Pritchard in the middle, and you can see Farrell sort of putting his fingers around that statue.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh, I really wanted him to grab that vase and just
and just preparing himself. which might, I mean, just thinking about it now, that might be an homage, I don't know, to the sundial in the big clock, but I say that only in passing. And he's almost lifting it off the side table, getting ready to knock Pritchard out, and then puts it down slowly, and the tension just slowly ebbs away. That is a Hitchcockian scene for me. I think that is absolutely superb. And Nina's in one of my other favorite scenes, which is the chase.
I was going to say that was my third one. Is the chase?
They go in. So Pritchard sends 2 assassins to kill Nina.
Yeah, and
Farrell susses it out, and he's on it and gives chase or goes to Warner.
What is it? Where's Laurel and Hardy going? Is that what he says to?
That's what. Yeah, where's Laurel and Hardy going? He says. Yeah, and he says something like, "I gave him an order. Just move on," sort of thing. But it's a chase that has stakes. It has a real, genuine reason to happen. It's not just there to fill 120 seconds or 180 seconds of excitement. It's got a real purpose, and there are a couple of chases in this film where the bad guy is almost able to touch Costner.
Oh yes,
and you're really on the edge of your seat.
Yes.
Too often movie chases, the hero's got every chance of getting away. Even in Bond films. Here, there's a bit at the end, the chase at the end, where he gets slashed in the arm.
Oh yes,
and he has to run up the stairs. He's only just through that door before the bloke chasing him is grabbing him by the shoulders.
Yeah,
and it's really well choreographed. So yeah, those 2 scenes, the interrogation of Pritchard and the chase to save Nina, I think are brilliantly done. Done.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, yes, the final climax of the witnesses and stuff like that. That is all great as well. But those 3 scenes with Nina, I don't know what those really, really stood out to me as 3 really impactful moments. That I thought those were wonderful. Shall we go on to the reveal?
Yeah, go on. Go on.
So this really is one of those twists that blows your mind. This blows away any sort of M. Night Shyamalan twist, any sort of Christopher Nolan Inception is what is real, what isn't real twist. Oh, this is
it's not too clever for its own good.
It's not too clever for its own good. Like I said, they're looking for Yuri this whole time. There's all this talk of a Russian spy deep embedded. You get to the end of the film and they're like, oh well, okay, there clearly is no Yuri. Whatever, there's no Yuri. And then, once, I like the final confrontation between Pritchard, Bryce, and Farrell, and Pritchard turns on, or Bryce turns on Pritchard and starts to frame him, and then Pritchard shoots himself, and then Bryce essentially gets away. Which, how hard boiled is that? You don't get more hard boiled than the bad guy getting away with it. And then Farrell goes away, and we find him sitting in a cemetery, which I'm assuming the grave he's sitting next to, I don't know if it's meant to be Susan's grave. It would be she would have been buried very quickly if that is her grave. So I don't think he's actually sat there, but he is sitting in a graveyard. I think it's more symbolic than actually Susan's grave. And those two guys come and find him, and they're like, a lot of people are looking for you. And then he's like, what? So I guess you're the special ones then.
Yeah.
And then he's being interrogated, and you think he's being interrogated by by the police, or not the police, but by the U.S. government. No, they start talking Russian.
Yeah.
Holy crap! My mouth dropped. I was like, wait, what? What? This mother effer was actually Yuri the whole time?
Yeah, and there are two things that you pick up on the second viewing, and it's really good.
Is it the really obvious landlord moment where it's like, what's this Russian landlord shoehorned into the film?
The landlord is one, and the other is when Pritchard first says to Bryce, we can blame it on Yuri. We can say the other man was Yuri. Bryce says, oh, come on. People have known for 10 years that Yuri doesn't exist. They gave up on Yuri being real in 1983 or something, he says. And you think, oh, well, dismissed it then. They're gonna frame a fake spy, a spy that doesn't exist. Even better, the killer was a ghost. The killer didn't exist. Nope, Yuri's been there all the time that Farrell's been in a naval aid. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So it's one of those twists that, like you say, Lee, your jaw drops first time, but when you watch it again and realise it's been teased in front of you, and then pulls the rug out from under you, it's double impact. It's brilliant. It's one of my favourite twists.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's. Speaking personally, I've never understood those people who say the thing about a whodunit is you can only read it once or watch it once. No, if it's a good one, if it's a really good one, you can watch it a number of times. I've watched Body Heat a number of times, and every time it's got something extra for me. Maybe I'm just a very slow learner, but I pick up extra things each time, and I do with No Way Out. And also coming at it from the perspective of a writer, as a crime writer, and I'm sure you guys may be similar in this respect. You're always looking to see how good books, good scripts achieve their effects. And once you know what the effects are, you can then get a better appreciation the second time around of how the writer went about constructing the story, whether it's the viewpoint or the way that information is conveyed to the reader, the point in the story where particular things are revealed or explained, whatever it may be. And you can admire that craft and I think learn from it as a writer. That's what I'm always trying to do when I see a good script on TV or film, or read a good book. I'm trying to understand what the writer was doing, the choices that were made, and would I make the same choices? What were the pros and cons of the particular choices that were made? And this is a particularly interesting example, I think, because the story was there already, and the film was there already. So as we said at the beginning, they really should have a reason to do something fresh with it, and they do, and it's a particularly brilliant way, I think, of remaking a film to add on this twist that's perfectly foreshadowed, as we see from scene one and intermittently during the film, right to the end when we think, oh yeah, wow, it's an amazing moment when the truth does finally hit you, and to do this in such a way that, certainly from speaking for myself, I don't think it's just gratuitously tacked on. It feels to me as it could always have been there. Actually, it's just another way of telling the story that Bruce Graham and Samuel Fuller and Kenneth Fearing and Julian Simmons have told, and others as well have told before. But it's done in a really compelling and well-structured way. The structure, the integration of the plot is it's one of those that seems effortless, but it isn't effortless. It's very, very well crafted and very deliberately crafted.
And I think there's another point to make in addition to that, Martin, which is that they would probably have known that there would be people like you, many people like you, who will have known the big clock.
Yeah.
Who will have seen it, who will have read it.
Yeah.
Who will say, well, he's just going to be looking for himself, isn't he? And so to those people, they say, well, here's a twist just for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that everyone's rewarded, and going back to your point about why people when people say you can't read a whodunit twice or any crime novel twice, I agree. You're not there, or you shouldn't be there, and good crime fiction doesn't allow you to only be there to find out who's done it. You go back to it, yes, to see how the clues are plotted, but also you go back for the relationships between the characters if they are well done and well structured and well presented and well delineated and well presented. There's more to crime fiction than the whodunit twist, just as there's more to No Way Out than that double whammy of a twist at the end. For all the things we've said, the structure of this script, the amount of plates this script is spinning, the superb performances, bringing to life superbly written characters.
Yeah.
And under 2 hours. And for $15 million. These are the day when you can make a film for $15 million and get it in under 2 hours. In today's movie making industry, I don't know what $15 million would buy you. Lunch.
Not much. I was going to say I do really like this concept that you guys are talking about with this hunt for Yuri, and that is, I love it. It adds, when you get the reveal, Farrell's eagerness to resolve and send suspicion away from him becomes more dramatic and more urgent, and you understand his urgency more than what you did previously. Because you think, if you have read the book or you've seen the other film, you kind of understand it. You get, they think they might try and frame him for the killing, so he needs to make sure that they don't have that ability to do that. But actually, he is literally the whole time hunting for himself. He is hunting for Yuri, and he has to make sure that they don't find Yuri. And that reveal, that sort of double whammy, gives it that sort of momentary fourth act surprise punch.
Yeah.
That then just leaves you, as the credits roll, just speechless. And I mean, this is I could have easily stopped it and then just instantly rewatched it. Like this is that kind of film, because I agree with you guys. Like it's the relationships. It's not just once you find once you get the revelation that, oh, well, you're done, you don't need to return to this. No. I mean, why do we go back and reread Sherlock Holmes? Why do we go back and reread Philip Marlowe or Christie or Savers? It's because we love the dynamics that are happening between the characters, and because we already know the twist. So that reveal doesn't hold as much weight. It's spending time with those people, hanging out with those people. And, I mean, why do we rewatch films? Why do we re-listen to songs? Why do we rewatch plays? Exactly. It's always, there's always something new to be gained, and it's worthwhile, I think.
Yeah. But there's just one other thing I wanted to, I meant to mention it earlier when Martin was talking about the big clock, and tension being created by the clock ticking, because we have that in this film, don't we? Because we have the gimmick of the Polaroid negative. That's this film's big clock. The Polaroid negative.
You just slow it down, slow the clock down.
Yeah, and he says, slow it down, and that's where the tension in this film comes from in terms of time is ticking away. Because the minute that image, this is No Way Out's big clock. The minute that image comes,
he's done.
And it made me think of The Usual Suspects when the bloke in the hospital bed is describing Kaiser Soze to that police artist, and it's being faxed through, and there's only a certain amount of time before Kaiser Soze's face is well known to everybody, and Kevin Spacey's still in the police station, and he's got to get out quick, and I wonder if that's a direct influence from this film. I mean, connections everywhere. You can see them if you go looking for them. But I just wanted to mention that this film does have a big clock in it, in inverted commas, and it, for the time this film is set, and it's set in this time for obvious reasons that we talked about in terms of the politics of the time it was made. It's a pretty good substitute, I think. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's. I just think there's so much artistic pleasure to be gained on that second view and third view, and so on. So even when you know what the added twist is, it's still a great watch.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think we have thoroughly investigated No Way Out. I think it's time to rate it. What do you guys think?
I think so.
All right. So
I can't wait for this.
As you know, as the audience, as you know, we or maybe you don't know if you're a first-time listener, but we rate all of our films out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. Out of 5 Falcons, Martin, we'll start with you. How many Falcons would you give No Way Out?
Oh, I'm going to go for 5 because I really like this one. It's I've mentioned that the book has interested me for many years, and the book's beautifully written. If I may, if you'll indulge me, I'll just read you a sentence when he's talking. This is George Stroud talking about a guy called Hagen, who is I think the Pritchard equivalent, and this gives you an idea of the style. His mother was a bank vault, and his father an international business machine. I knew he was almost as loyal to Yanoth as to himself. And that gives you a flavour of the writing of the original Big Clock. So Big Clock is a 5 out of 5 for me, and so is this film.
I think that's fair enough. I will go next. I'm the same. It is a 5 out of 5. And look, you've just read a clip of the book. We've been talking about the Big Clock, the original film. Now you've got this. You have, audience, you have an opportunity to go and experience this story 3 different ways, and all 3 are superb.
Yeah.
That is not the case with most adaptations. From novel adaptation to remake, that all 3 are amazing and worth your time. So this is take advantage of this situation.
Absolutely.
Matt.
It's a 1 for me. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to say, for all the things we've mentioned, for the performances, for the plate spinning this script does, for the tightness of the script, for all the technical directorial choices, for the tension, for everything, it's got to be a 5. For a remake that that stands on its own, but is also doffs its cap to the original. And as you say, Luke, I mean, I couldn't put it better. There are 3 different ways of experiencing this story. This one take on that story, as Martin's made allusion to, there are many takes on this actual concept, but 3 different ways of enjoying this particular take on it, and all 3 are superb. Yes. And you can't say that very often.
No.
So No Way Out is 5 Falcons. Was from the minute we started.
There we go. Go find it. Go buy it. I'll be honest, it's hard to find. I had to get the digital copy. Physical copies are not readily available. This, I think, leans back to what we were talking about earlier about being not underrated, but lesser known in this day and age. Because when it came out, it was well received. It made a lot of money. Critics liked it. It wasn't underrated. So it's not underrated. It's just not well known today. But go find it. Let's see if we can get some life breathed back into No Way Out and get a 4K release of this. I would love a 4K release. This would be amazing.
Yeah, it deserves it. It deserves it.
It does. And Kevin Costner needs the money now because of his. So that was mean. Sorry, Kevin. That was mean. But look, your Westerns didn't do the bang you thought they were going to do. But, he burned up all of his Yellowstone money. But Martin, thank you for coming and joining us on this episode of Mean Streets. And,
thank you very much, Martin.
Hopefully bring you back on in the future.
Well, I'd love to. Great to be with you. Great to talk to you about a lovely film in good company.
Thank you. And where can people find you if they want to hunt you down or hunt your books down on the internet? They can.
I try to make myself as non-elusive as possible, unlike Farrell. So my website's martinedwardsbooks.com. And basically, if you Google my name, you will come up sometimes with the former chairman of Manchester United. That is not me, but other than him, I'm very much in the City camp. I've got to say. Other than him, you'll find me fairly easily, I think. And I hope you take a look.
Indeed, go find Martin online. Find his books. Buy his books. They are excellent. Well. I think that is, as we've said, that is No Way Out well and truly investigated. So I think we can file this one away. We will be back next week with another episode. So we will see you then. But in the meantime, take care walking down those mean streets.
Bye.